You guys waited long enough, and I'm sure this will be a lengthy video, so let's cut to the chase. You know what? That's a pretty good summary of this game's new approach on just about everything. Before we could take our time and play defensively, 2 says, no, relying on those old habits will only get you punished. Instead, this game is all about playing hyper aggressive, to kill your enemies before they kill you. That's the new objective. So there's no time to wait around, and we must get a move on. This is Combat Overview. Here we go over all the general controls and mechanics, who and what we use them on, and then seeing how it all comes together. Okay, so fundamentally, NG2 still works the same way as 1. Because of that, I'll do a quick summary of things we've already went over in the previous video. Got the regular light attacks, still committal, but they become so fast, it's hardly even noticeable. You're still locked into that combo, like your placement, even if you delay your next input. Thing is, you'll never have to carefully delay your attacks in this game. There's no point in catching enemies' recovery or hitting their startup to do a counter hit. Those more calculated plays to react to specific behaviors have no place in this game. There's just no time for that. It's all about maintaining our turn at all costs and making sure the enemy never gets to play. Alright, neutral heavy attacks have their rare moments, mainly with the scythe and the true dragon sword when we get it. But really, you'll just do the light attacks for the quicker everything. And some other added benefits, but we'll talk about that soon. And the guard brick properties from 1 don't exist anymore, I don't think. No reason to use them anyways because no enemy blocks or requires us to adapt in that way like before. So it's another reason to mainly use light attacks. Running attacks still exist, but just like NGB, you're going to use them very sparingly. Directional attacks are still here too, only 2 of these matter, and I'll be repeating them a lot, so you'll become familiar with them soon enough. Now for strings. The main one we used a lot in NGB was XY. That was a starter, punish, let do crowd control, and overall was the best thing to use for most situations. Well, not so much anymore. The tried and true air slam attack is something I never used this time around, not with the dragon sword anyways. In all honesty, that weapon is no longer the best one around. So yeah, since we're not using XY anymore, even the dragon sword's Zuna drop has fallen to the wayside. Kinda surprising because I spammed it like no tomorrow, and well, tomorrow finally showed up, and it's called Ninja Gaiden 2. Because enemies in this game will not let that slide anymore. They are way more likely to grab the end lag, or stick you with a million IS as you land. Only way to make it safe is by Nimpo cancelling. But besides that, the Dragon Sword's Zuna drop is more riskier than ever before around those ninjas. I'm being very specific right now because other weapons' Zuna drops against certain enemies aren't much of a problem in comparison. They're actually quite powerful. But yeah, you'll see that later. Basically, don't lean on the Dragon Sword as much in this game. It's still solid, but everything else is just so much better in comparison. And with the higher enemy count, we need a weapon with larger hitboxes and that can multi-hit. So out with the Dragon Sword, and in with the Lunar and Scythe. More the Lunar, but yeah, these should be your go-to weapon for most of the sequel. They kinda do it all. Besides playing for peak efficiency, weapons in general are more advanced than ever before. So good in fact, it's entirely possible to beat the game with a single weapon. There's even achievements to do just that, which is pretty cool. Yeah, there's more to delve into with each weapon in the sequel, like the Tonfa's Heavenly Justice mechanic. It's this mid-combo cancel to bob and weave around enemies with full iframes. Haven't used it too much, but it's pretty fun so far. Speaking of all these weapons, we can more easily swap between them with this hotkey. This is a nice change since certain weapons are better for specific enemies, so quicker access lets us adapt more smoothly. There are times where it has this lengthy delay just locking our inputs. So to be safe, wait until your current action is completely done before opening this window. And oh yeah, ETs, UTs, and essence management. Nothing has changed since 1, so everything we went over still applies. Holding heavy attack will build charge, which has 2 levels, starting with ET and reaching a max level with that UT. And yeah, with the help of essence dropped by fallen enemies, we can absorb them to speed up that process by continuing to hold Y. 1 yellow essence gives us that ET, 2 yellows gives us that UT, and then 1 blue or 1 red will also give that UT, since they're more rare. You can make this process a whole lot faster by doing all landings. So by holding Y as you land, it'll bypass that startup animation altogether, And the usual setup for these is by dash jumping away, or wind path. There's more, but these are by far the most common routes. Now, to prevent essence from being auto-absorbed, hold block at all times, which means your main form of movement will now be a dash step into wind run. Not only does it chain a large amount of iframes as we're in constant motion, but we can do a guillotine throw, wind path, aerial Azuna drop as well, because some weapons have a scooping attack to lift them up, or we can just go into a simple on landing straight away. So our options are far from limited as we hold down that guard. And yeah, these charge attacks have iframes, track, do full auto combos, will drop guaranteed yellow essence on kills. There's also multipliers depending on if you kill them with the ET or UT, but if used for your next instant charge, then you get a fraction of that multiplied value. Now just know these can whiff, but charge attacks from two-handed weapons can play out no matter what. And that detail is why we use a 360 looting UT for majority of the game. Also, being consistent with your on landings is basically required here. You just can't afford to have any downtime in the sequel, so you better perfect these. Just be careful with your chaining. It still requires some spatial awareness because you don't want to jump into a crowd of enemies, right? No, you want to make sure you have a brief moment to let that orb fly over. Speaking of which, I think this is a nice spot to talk about level design. So do you remember how much I applauded NGB's intro stage to tell us everything we needed to know? Well, NG2 does the same exact thing. Because the moment we're dropped into gameplay, there's no time to get used to the controls like in 1. No, the game already has this expectation that you played the first one. And this intro will definitely catch you up to speed on what's new. But besides the improved mechanics, the structure of the game has changed as well. It's no longer an adventure game like before, but a linear action game. Now depending on who you ask, that's either an improvement or a downgrade. But to me, it's just a different approach to level design. Because this opening chapter alone has a few interesting layouts to create unique encounters. And it's pretty cool to see those concepts get expanded upon later throughout the game. Like how we use doorways to filter enemies one at a time, or get them clustered at choke points, something the Lycans will fall victim to quite often. There's also thin hallways, just very close narrow corridors where we're forced to fight enemies head on. Or varied elevations. The beginning has examples of slants, but there's the Bone Hill, and of course the famous staircase. If you played NG1, there's a chance you got a sneak peek of what's to come, but NG2 just amped it up to 11. So now you really have to be aware of those tilted terrains, and that's because it affects your on-landing timings. Even walls, those things play a massive part in this game. For instance, there's this alleyway I'm a big fan of for creating this cramped arena that really forces you to engage with the geometry. It also has this unique plus sign layout that you won't see ever again. There's also that U-shaped hallway at the beginning of the game. Yeah, I really commend their efforts to crafting these distinct areas to fight in. It's not just simple square rooms repeated ad nauseum. There's actual variety in shape and size. Could be harsh edges or curves or different elevations. And those details heavily influence our decision making when approaching certain fights, which also goes a long way to prevent the game from getting stale. But I can't forget, these also set up wall splats. They even double as cover from projectiles, allowing you to safely charge a UT from safety. Once you play Master Ninja, then you'll understand just how important that is. There's also arenas that obscure your line of sight, like the pillars in the train station, or the tall grass that hides those ninjas' next move, or the fog in the forest. So these varied layouts require some level of spatial awareness to use them effectively, for both defensive or offensive plays. Like knowing your best escape option because you don't want to corner yourself right, or maybe you want to find that corner to set up throw loops. And of course there's the rare stage hazard to keep things interesting. So just like the original NES games, the sequel still does interesting things with this level design. And you guys let me know if I'm looking too much into this, but I see these levels as fighting game stages, DOA to be specific. There's some strong similarities at times. I'll just do a quick side by side. But yeah, as you can tell, some of these look really spot on. I think this was an extremely smart idea to base levels off DOA stages. Well, that's what I'm assuming anyways, because they're perfect for an action game. There's verticality, ledges, obstacles to vault over, varied layouts, unique stage interactions from slopes to destructibles, which are perfect for wall splats. Now, I'm still very new to the series, but since I'm a huge Team Ninja fan, I had to dip into it eventually. And one of the many things that really stuck out were the stages. They're just nothing like regular fighting games. To me, they're more akin to beat 'em ups. Like the danger zone is a perfect spot for the classic elevator brawl session. Or the bridge, it's great to restrict your movement, really forcing a head-on fight and test crowd control. In Gambler's Paradise, having you avoid oncoming traffic is pulled right from the NG beat 'em up. Like there's a treasure trove of amazing ideas for level design. Even Tekken 4 has examples of this, right? With the slants, pillars, and railings. Not sure if that's considered fair in a competitive setting, but I find those things very interesting. So level design does an amazing job at creating engaging encounters, but it also creates a very distinct identity for your game. It's why DOA is remembered today, same for NGB, Kingdom Hearts 1, DMC1, or God Hand. Action or combat heavy games in general need varied layouts. If not, it'll become bland, boring, and unremarkable. So just because a game is linear, it's not an excuse to neglect level design. Really glad NG2 didn't fall into that trap and managed to keep the original DNA from the NES games, where it combines combat with level design. And that's something I always like to see. Okay, with all that out of the way, it's time to talk about the new D-limb system. Moves now have this new utility to several limbs, and each of those have their own D-limb rate as well. Cool thing is, every weapon has at least one go-to string or move that will get the job done. On landing X with the Dragon Sword is pretty good, for example, but the bread and butter will always be XXY. This was already an amazing combo in 1, but it only got better in the sequel because of its high D-limb rate. Plus, it's shuriken cancelable, so we can quickly follow up with an OT. Yeah, the muscle memory will carry over, but we just need to add a single heavy attack afterwards. For the Lunar, the first 2 light attacks is all you need. Pretty much guarantees a D-limb. And with its speed and reach, it's my go-to string to get things started, especially on larger fiends. The heavy ender has a chance to explode their head if you decide to toss it out, but I do the guard reset tech from NG1 instead. Lets me repeat my most valuable moves in quick succession, then follow up with the OT whenever possible. But the Talons have one of the best D-limb moves in the entire game, and that's forward Y. This slide move will work on pretty much everything, from fast ninjas to tanky fiends. This move knows no pounds, so don't hold back from using it. Oh, and one more thing, the UT on dual blades and Tonfa are absolutely insane at D-limbing. Even at level 1, their UTs on the right enemies are still amazing no matter what the difficulty. So if you thought UTs were powerful before, well, they only got better. It has iframes, good range, auto combos, super damaging, builds that SS multiplier, big payout for kills, which will be many, gives a few score bonuses, and now it nearly guarantees D-limbs too. Yeah, UTs allow us to start and maintain our offense while being safe as possible. So they're just optimal. Anyways, so no matter what you're using, you'll have a few combos that are generally good at D-limbing, while others specialize in dealing large damage instead. That's why it's a good idea to learn a weapon's best D-limb string and how to cancel into OTs. Oh, and which limb it'll cut off is also important. It actually matters, crazily enough. Mages can't have their legs chopped off, for example, so use the flying swallow instead. But decapitating zombies will instant kill like most other enemies. It'll lower their accuracy, but they'll still walk around attacking with their weapon arms. So there's enemy specific stuff you have to be aware of too. Yeah, the only other game with this amount of thought into D-limbing, or D-limbing in general, was Nanobreaker. So at least we have more examples now. Alright, once D-limbed, they are now vulnerable to the new obliteration technique, aka OTs. Now, not only do we get an instant takedown, but we are completely invulnerable as it plays out, and a tiny bit afterwards as well. So we get some iframes as we exit the animation, which is nice. As you can imagine, these become our break in the middle of these intense fights. They're sort of comparable to pummels from God Hand, being this iframe finishing move on weakened enemies. Similar idea. So yeah, to pull this off, we need to get in close and press the heavy attack. Pretty simple, right? They seem to be easy pickings since they're at a slight disadvantage. Well, not exactly. They actually become more dangerous, and that's because they get this deadly grab to take you with them. They can do a good job at that too if you're not careful, easily wiping your town health bar. But it is possible to break out by mashing the face buttons and spinning the left thumbstick. I think that helps anyways. Yeah, approach these guys with caution before attempting your OT, like using dash steps to close the gap with iframes, or shurikens. Those keep them stunned long enough to interrupt or prevent a grab. So if you're ever in a situation where you want to OT back to back, for example, it'll be a good idea to throw a shuriken between kills to stun your next target. But this crowd control mainly works on ninjas. For the other heavier fiend type enemies, most times it's best to just dash step between OTs. And really try your best to get close as possible, because with there being so many enemies nearby, the targeting can get confused on who to prioritize. And even if Ryu does go for the right guy, it's possible to whiff. So with how intense things can get, and how quickly it can all fall apart, try your best to get close as possible to avoid any weird jank, because it really can be the difference between life or death. At times I wonder if a separate button prompt would have led to more consistent interactions like God of War or God Hand, because relying on contextual actions to work 100% of the time in such a demanding game leads to some undeserved damage that you had no control over. Just the game breaking under its own pressure, I suppose. And another thing, just beware that severing more than 2 limbs will automatically kill that enemy. So no need to worry about them after that. Now then, let's dive into those sub-weapons, starting with the classic shurikens. While they're kind of required to play NG2 at any level. Might sound intimidating, but it'll become second nature in no time. So, for starters, shuriken cancels are amazing as always. It shortens end lag, allowing us to keep up the pressure, or keep our options open to quickly adapt to any situation, like doing an OT or 2-way position. They also stagger enemies, mainly ninjas though, but be sure to toss them out before each on landing, or most times at least, because it prevents you from grabbing nearby walls, which means less downtime, but those staggers or forcing an enemy to stop for just long enough to block it is very important. That brief pause helps control that nearby crowd to make those on landings that much safer. Alright, since they point Ryu towards that nearest enemy, it makes for the perfect follow-up after Rim Path, Azuna Drop, ETs, UTs, OTs, etc. to help control the surrounding area. Not only that, but Ryu is most likely facing an off-screen enemy. So now we're able to recenter the camera soon after to get a better view of our next target. So yeah, try your best to shuriken whenever possible. Its benefits have only improved in the sequel. Incendiary shurikens are here as well, and these things are sort of busted. I won't delve into it here, so I'll let them speak for themselves along the way, but trust me, they'll come up quite often. Windmill was also brought back, but we get it so late in the game I never messed with it. I already had my setup figured out, so I didn't need to fill in any roles pretty much. Now for the bow, NG2 added a few things, like allowing jump shots when we finally get a reticle. They did take out different ammo types sadly, but the bow and every other projectile got their very own UT. So by holding down the fire button, it'll begin the charge. You can even absorb essence to speed up the process. But yeah, the bow will deal more damage of course, but also pierces. Incendiaries will toss out 3 at once. Windmill will be stronger, pierces, and more likely to delume. And that's it. Regular shurikens don't have their very own version, and neither does the water Gatling gun. This might be a hot take, but these don't do anything for me. The concept is cool, but I feel like they can do better. For one, they don't have iframes like the standard weapon UTs, so between using essence to prep projectile UT, or a lunar 360 UT, or a scythe UT, yeah, that decision is pretty easy to make. But what really throws me off is the time to kill, specifically with the bow. The amount of damage you get for full charge is on par with the regular bow in NG1. And that bow was a lot faster too, since you didn't need to wait for it to charge between every shot. While in NG2, it's basically required to prep that full UT to even face a regular rocket launcher, while a simple shot in NGB was more than effective. But the difference of the bow's time to kill between both games is pretty noticeable, especially since we're charging their UT from a neutral state, with no essence to speed things up. So I like the idea of projectile UTs, but it seems like the base damage was lowered to justify the UT's existence, and having to wait to charge these to deal any decent damage is a pace killer. Just adding an extra step to something we did more than fine in the previous game. Onto defenses. Blocking still covers you entirely, so you'll snap to whichever direction the attack is coming from. though you shouldn't be standing still to begin with. You want to avoid being grabbed and all that. But you're still going to hold down that guard button throughout entire fights to not auto-absorb essence and to constantly prep a guard buffer. And yeah, guard buffering still exists. So be sure to hold a guard because if an enemy attacks you at any point during your recovery, you'll cancel it and instantly raise your block to defend yourself. And this can be done out of any action pretty much, from basic strings, counters, Azuna drop, guillotine throw, ETs, UTs, OTs, and so much more. Okay, as we're holding that block, we gain access to our new dash step by moving the left thumbstick. Yeah, the roll was replaced, but this dash is a lot quicker and less hand lag too. So fast in fact, we can chain them back to back and completely avoid these massive explosions right beneath our feet. That's how little recovery it has. And with that new speed, it's even better at chaining into other defensive options like the wind run. So it better fits the sequel's more high octane gameplay, which I like. Speaking of which, let's do a quick rundown of wind run since we've already talked about it in the past. So it's this leap that can either be aimed yourself or it'll auto target to the nearest enemy, with full iframes by the way. That's why dash step into wind run is the most common thing you'll be doing here. It keeps you very safe as you move around. But since it's pretty good at aiming, you can think of it as the shurikens, how it can help reorient or readjust yourself by pointing you in the right direction, which then lets you reposition to get a clearer view of the crowd. It's also the best setup for the lunar scooping Azuna drop. Anyways, from a wind run, we can do a wind path. Again, we went over this a lot before, but this head stomp is an amazing way to crowd control. That's because it interrupts, staggers, and can be chained over multiple enemies of all sizes. Oh, did I mention it also has iframes? So now that we escape those surrounding enemies, now we can chip away at those numbers from the outside. Just be aware of your surroundings though. Over relying on the auto aim might toss yourself back into that crowd, and we definitely don't want that. But besides wind path, we can do a guillotine throw. Now this has received a noticeable buff in the sequel. Okay, so it's a grab that works on human-sized enemies. It also crowd controls since they're being tossed away from the fight. It can even hit enemies on the way out, which is pretty cool. Has tons of iframes both before and after it ends. Way more than one, that's for sure. And as a cherry on top, if the enemy is thrown into a wall, it's a guaranteed delim. Which yeah, means you can perform an OT for even more iframes. And with all those additional iframes, you can now chain these back to back. But even if you're in an open area, we can follow up with a flying swallow, which also has iframes as you close the gap. Yeah, guillotine throw is an all-around amazing defensive tool that will become a mainstay in the sequel. Alright, now in NG1 I recommended you to steer clear from using the flying swallow. Well, that's about to change because it's been improved a lot. For one, it can be done in neutral, doesn't require an enemy to access anymore, has iframes too, which is nice. Once the dragon sword is upgraded, not only can we chain these back to back, but after connecting that flying swallow, you'll bounce up a tiny bit, which means we can do on landings. So it's no longer this one and done laggy move. Now it's another movement option to quickly turn the tides with an instant charge UT or an on-landing X, which remember, is pretty good at delimiting. And with a slight delay, we'll link into an OT. Or you can do an on-landing forward Y, or on-landing forward X into Y, which can go into launcher, and a Azuna drop, or maybe skip the Azuna drop and do an on-landing instant charge, or maybe another on-landing X. There's quite a few routes you can take with these now. So definitely sprinkle this into your gameplay, more often than not. But there's some other new tricks with it. So if you flying swallow an airborne enemy, it will insta-kill. A good setup is X, hold Y, shuriken cancel to juggle, wind run to auto-aim, and then flying swallow to finish the job. There you go. But besides the dragon sword, the talons probably have one of the best flying swallows because it combos into an Azuna drop. So just press XY after it connects. And the window isn't as strict as you might think, since you'll both hover in the air for long enough. Yeah, I think that's it. But as you can tell, wind run is by far the most fundamental tool we have in our kit, since it ties everything together for both defensive and offensive plays. I skipped over this, but the counter system has also changed. The first thing you'll notice is how the timing for it is a little different. Attempting to counter a tiny bit after an attack makes contact, like in 1, will have you go into this whiff animation instead, leaving yourself pretty vulnerable. Instead, you need to counter preemptively for it to work most times. So it's no longer a reactionary option like before. But if timed properly, you'll get iframes with both versions. Like counter will do this forward swipe that delims most times, which sets up an OT. And heavy counter will do this 360 spin before launching, which can lead into an Azuna drop. Now, as cool as it is to get near guaranteed limbs off a successful counter, it's something I really attempted in most playthroughs. Using our guard is a pretty committal action as it is, so the perfect counter that also has startup, yeah, that's a tall order to ask for. In all honesty, only attempt a counter after an OT or UT. We're given a brief moment of invulnerability afterwards. Might as well use that to our advantage, which can chain into more iframes. So if you see an enemy approaching you at the tail end of an OT or UT, which they usually are, then yeah, that's when I go for it. I'm standing still anyways, and this guy's winding up for an attack, might as well try to counter. Okay, not only that, but enemies that are hit with the counter might not even be delimbed. Or worse yet, they can dodge out of your successful counters. Yeah, I don't know about that. If the stricter timing does not guarantee a heavy reward, I say avoid counters and use them on extremely rare occasions. Think I used it a handful of times during my Master Ninja playthrough, so it's really not seen much. Not worth the trouble because the reward shouldn't be left to chance for such a high risk option. If the game demands strict consistency from most of the players, then it's only fair we expect a consistent outcome to match the skill required to pull it off. That's how all forms of Isen worked in Onimusha Warlords, and that's by far the most high risk, high reward defensive mechanic around. If only it matched that standard. So the counter in 2 has all the risk, but no guaranteed reward, even when done properly. And that sort of balance should never be the case. But that inconsistency helps push us away from standing still even further, because waiting for an opportunity to present itself is not the way NG2 is meant to be played, because standing still and reacting is no longer a viable strategy as it once was. Instead, we want to avoid enemies' attacks through the use of movement, even more so than NG1, to create our own openings, and use our speed to avoid any kind of static behavior, whether being too focused on one enemy or being stuck in end lag. And that's the massive shift between both games. It's no longer waiting for the opponent to mess up, it's about making sure we don't mess up. So the roles have been reversed and promotes a more proactive approach, not a reactive one. Alright, this is something I haven't talked about yet, but it's the topic of having a lock-on in Ninja Gaiden. And well, it doesn't need it. So what new players need to understand is that this game is all about constant movement, having you jump both literally and figuratively from enemy to enemy, always swapping targets, which means there's no time to focus on one thing, because you'll be heavily punished if you do. And that idea was taken to the next level in the sequel. So once you make the connection that NG2 heavily encourages you to track the entire crowd rather than what's inside it, things will start to make sense. Looking at the HUD, there's a blue bar as health, but there's an interesting change to it. Because if you notice, we have this sort of gray health whenever we take damage. Well, that will auto-regenerate once the current fight is over. Now my guess as to why this was added is because you are meant to take damage. It's kind of impossible not to. So don't be too worried about taking too many hits, the game is designed to slowly beat you down. But you're also chipping away at those large crowds. Yeah, it's about dying slower than your enemies. And there's a reason why that phrase has been circulated around for many years. And that's because it perfectly sums up what NG2 is all about. So damage may be unavoidable, but the game shows us mercy afterwards. If we lived, that is. Speaking of which, once the fight ends, hold block. Right now we're just waiting for our health to fully auto heal, but once that's done, then release your guard. We do this to make sure we don't pick up any nearby blue essence too early. We would rather have that go to regaining actual lost health. Now when it comes to upgrading that health, things have gotten a lot better. So now we can use all 9 orbs at once if you have them. This removes so much downtime in the menus. And not only does it increase your max health, but it completely heals you too. Same goes for the Life of the 1000 Gods. It raises your health as well as be a full heal. Because of that, it's not a bad idea to keep some of these max upgrades as a massive heal during those tougher fights. Usually I save 1 or 2, maybe 3 for the final stretch of the game, but don't be too stingy about using the rest much earlier, especially for your first playthrough when you're still trying to learn a lot of things. Because just like in NG1, the beginning chapters will be the toughest. You have a small health bar, weak weapons, and no Nimpo, or not much of it. So increasing your health bar will not only make the game easier, larger margin for errors, but your healing items won't be shortchanged either. It can actually give more value. Alright, there's still more stuff about health because interacting with the save statue for the first time will not heal you. But since that's a one-time use, the refill, not the ability to save, there will be instances where it's best to skip these. because if I have a lot of health by the time I reach a new checkpoint, I'd rather keep this free heal till after a fight or two. So try to keep this auto heal for when you really need it. Now on lower difficulties, this sort of strict routing is not necessary, but it kinda is on Mentor and Master Ninja. Or if you can, try and backtrack to the most recent statue after every successful encounter. We'll save time and avoid the headache of redoing multiple gauntlets. And that's useful no matter what mode you're playing on. And one last thing, be sure to rotate a few save slots just to be safe, especially on higher difficulties. You'll want to soft lock yourself and be forced to completely restart. Alright, on an impo. Our first one would be Inferno, and it works similar to 1. Starts off by sending out 1 fireball to 3 once fully leveled. So try your best to scan the room to lock onto those high priority targets. And Nimpo canceling is still a thing as well. So to really cover your bases, use Nimpo to cancel stuff we can't by normal means. Especially after OTs. That'll really make sure you're extra safe. Just keep in mind, Inferno is no longer the beast as it once was. Still pretty good, but not like before. There's also noticeable delay between uses, so it's more like Sigma 1 than NGB. But similar to that game, you can't unequip and re-equip it to remove that pause, but you're spending the same amount of time fiddling in the menus as it takes for the delay to end. So the time spent now using the next Nimpo just evens out anyways. So Inferno has its moments, but the next Nimpo is a true star of the show. Yeah, Windblades is by far the best Nimpo in the game. It's a guaranteed D-limb against groups, even against those larger enemies like Vangelfs and Lycans. Not much of a damage dealer though, but since it puts enemies in a terrible spot, basically an insta-kill since OTs exist. At first it only shoots forward, so be sure to face a cluster of enemies. But once fully leveled, it just becomes this large barrier that shreds anything and everything that it touches. And like I mentioned before, if you sever 2 limbs, they will instantly die. So if you're in a room full of regular or big body enemies on their last leg, both literally and figuratively, then use Windblades to end the fight in an instant. Oh, and another perk about level 3 Windblades, it'll kill any type of ninja in a single cast. And it doesn't matter if they're full health or delimbed beforehand. No, they'll just be taken out right then and there. So yeah, this will save you from any hectic spot, which is pretty much every fight. Avoided Nimpo is pretty good too, very niche, but that's why it's still pretty good. So it's a straightforward projectile that has to be aimed to get any value. And since things move pretty fast, it's a little tricky to land. So to make it work at all, it's great for those more larger enemies that don't move, or whenever enemies are in a straight line. So it's mainly used against those dragons in Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. Besides that, not much else. And just ignore Fire Phoenix, it's just a worse version of Fire Wheels. The birds aren't as close to you, have inconsistent patterns, and move pretty slow, so it's easy for things to get past them, and they're not fast enough to help deal extra damage. But anyways, you can still upgrade these individually, so focus on getting Blaze to level 3 first, then alternate upgrades between Inferno and Void. And with the Spirit of the Devils, we can gain an extra key slot, and just like Life of the Thousand Gods, it'll refill everything. So these can be held off till future fights where a lot of Nimpo is needed. For me, I wait till the multi-Resetsu fight in Chapter 11 and during the Dagger Die boss fight. Continuing the upgrade stuff, leveling up weapons will increase damage, adds more techniques, and improves D-limb rates. So here's what you want to do. Don't level up the Dragon Sword. It's okay enough in the sequel, but it gets outclassed pretty quick. Even on my Master Ninja playthrough, I never upgraded it a single time. It's just not needed. So I just waited till the free upgrade to level 4 once we get the true Dragon Sword by Chapter 11. So instead, focus on the Lunar first. This should be your priority because it'll make our bread and butter XXY combo even better. But most importantly, we'll get the Scooping Azuna Drop and Rotate Y. These two are amazing moves and the reason why it's my main weapon. Then get Talons to level 2 at the very least. And that's for the Flying Swallow into Azuna Drop. That's a get out of jail free card against those ninjas. And of course, the Forward Y for one of the best D-limb moves in the game. Upgrade the dual blades at least once by the start of Chapter 5. It's great against the new enemies here, the Lycans, and I use the Rotate Y for the boss fight of this chapter as well. Having it at level 3 would be nice, but you can leave it at level 2 for the rest of the game until we get a free upgrade during Chapter 14. And finally, the scythe. This is another weapon you want to upgrade in the very next chapter. It's extremely good against all the enemies in this stage and on a few upcoming bosses. So get it to level 3 as soon as possible. Besides those weapons, this is all you need. While the tonfas are really good, those definitely come in handy for chapter 11. Everything else though is completely optional. And for the shop stuff, they removed armlets, so there's no equipment stuff to form certain strategies. But with how OP Ryu is now, you might as well have a few of them all at once. The amount of items you can hold now has been standardized across the board for all difficulties, so only one talisman and a max of 3 items on everything. A lot smaller than one, but with the auto healing, refill statues, and rationing out those max HP upgrades, you'll be more than fine. And cool thing is, Muramasa has 2 free slots to have items you might have missed during the previous chapter. So if exploring isn't your thing, or you haven't memorized their locations, then he'll bring it to you for a price. So be sure to check in regularly, just in case. When it comes to enemies, we're going to start with the ninjas once again. So there's spider ninjas, white ninjas, tac ninjas, and of course, IS ninjas. The general strategy will be the same against every version. Well, it's more of a broader, generalized approach because honestly, things are a bit different in 1. So the back and forth aspects of 1 aren't here like they used to be. Instead, it's about making sure your turn never ends and theirs never begins. Because if they get to play, the momentum will shift into their favor in an instant, and that whiplash is hard to recover from. So you don't want the snowball effect to kick in for the opposition. It's no longer about they do this, so I do that kind of playstyle. Now you must go, and don't let up. Yeah, this game is all about extremes. You either die as soon as the fight begins, or you win before it even starts by getting the upper hand in some way. And that will require a combination of learning their spawn points and how to funnel enemies in through the level design. However, even that's not enough to deal with these guys. They're just too unpredictable and too relentless to earn a free win this way. Because you'll soon find out how a single fight can unravel in multiple different ways. There's just too many moving parts to expect the same results every time. But that uncertainty is another layer to the thrill that comes with fighting these new breed of ninjas. So you must be able to adapt and improvise in a moment's notice. But to do that, you need to know how and when to incorporate these different mechanics. There's also no guaranteed right way to use what when. The game is way more dynamic than ever before to give concrete responses. So the best option a second ago can possibly be the worst thing to do the next. Things really are that volatile. But that's where the game peaks. Those moments where you toe the line between life and death is why NG2 leaves you wanting more, because that rush really can't be found anywhere else. So all I can say is good luck, because you'll be thrown to the wolves without warning. Speaking of which, let's talk about the infamous IS ninjas. I do like these guys a lot, but I have some notes. Well, let's begin with the positives. They're shurikens, so I know these things are very oppressive, showing up from all angles, both on and off screen. It can be a lot to deal with because of that. But here's what you need to understand. These ninjas are not the same as the ones we fought in 1. Those guys taught us to be patient and observant of their every tell. In the sequel, however, that idea gets flipped on its head by these IS ninjas. So that defensive playstyle will not work out like it used to, which again backs up the previous claim that we can't give enemies a chance to attack, not even once. Instead, these new batch of ninjas teach us that there's no time to waste. We can't wait for our moments anymore. In this game, we need to create those moments for ourselves. So we're not here to punish their openings or end lag. 2 goes on the opposite end of the spectrum, having you being the aggressor, which means enemies are now trying to find your openings to punish. And those projectiles do a great job at testing your consistency, because once you falter, they'll take that moment of weakness to land a few incendiaries. And you'll know you got stuck because it'll stop Ryu in his tracks. So now we got this ticking time bomb on us. Yeah, we need to act quick. In 1, I would stand still waiting for the fuse to end before rolling away. But we don't have that leeway this time around, because others are itching to land even more of those. And since they toss these out at different timings, it's not enough to do 1 time dash to bypass the explosion. That definitely won't work. We need to chain many iframe moves in quick succession because there's a handful of them about to go off at different intervals. So my usual flow chart will be dash step into wind run. That right there changed quite a few iframes. Sometimes add a brief delay before that first dash, but this string should keep you relatively safe. Not only that, but WinRun links it to so many different follow-ups that also have iframes. So from here, we can do whatever we see fit. My usual go-to is the Gaiden throw, which has a potential to wall splat, which delimbs, and yeah, sets up an OT. Can even loop these back to back if you really want to. Same goes for Windpath. It's quick, has iframes, auto targets, interrupts, and staggers. Or Flying Swallow. And with the help of the talons, we can do some work since the claws versions starts from very far away, approaches with iframes, and also ends with iframes. Kills most times too. Yeah, this move will be your number one counter to these ninjas. Might be seen as a simple strategy, but Ninja Gaiden is all about efficiency, not style. So once we know how to kill an enemy as quickly as possible, then I say use that knowledge to your advantage, because it's quick, safe, and effective. Sounds to me like everything we need to beat Ninja Gaiden 2. So yeah, these guys might be a handful, but we have multiple routes to avoid the explosion by using dash step, run, wind path, Gaiden throw, OTs, flying swallow, Zuno chop, certain directional moves, wall attacks, ETs, UTs, and Ninpo. As you can tell, we are far from being unequipped to deal with these guys. But that's what makes these IS ninjas so damn great. They reinforce that idea that we must never stop moving. Because if we do, we become an easy target for them to stick even more IS. Like when we're doing OT, Zuno drop, or UT. Just because we avoided those explosions the first time with those previous iframes, it doesn't mean we're out of the woods just yet. We still need to keep ourselves safe as possible by preparing an exit plan. Now we have this loop of non-stop motion, where every move we make just might be our last. But with the right choices, we can make it through these adrenaline-pumping fights. So yeah, that's why these guys are top tier. They perfectly encapsulate what this sequel is all about, when it works. And that's to promote action, not reaction. So everything they do forces us to leave our comfort zone and get a move on. Sounds like classic Ninja Gaiden to me. Oh, and one last thing, they're not as dangerous once you know 90% of their attacks don't guard break. And like I mentioned in my Ninja Gaiden 1 video, these guys and enemies in general operate on a ticket system. So they don't attack you all at once, but rather take turns. Might seem hard to believe, especially in the heat of the moment, but it's true. A little more obvious when you're not the one playing and just looking at gameplay, but you'll notice pretty quickly how often they just surround you, but only one or two approach at a time. And yeah, that very important detail fell on deaf ears for Yaiba. Same goes for Urban Rain. Yeah, my gripe with that non-existent enemy design is still going strong. But anyways, enemies are ruthless here, but at least they take turns beating you up. It's only fair. But if that incendiary does go off, remember it launches you up, which means it links into an on-landing state. And you can use that to do multiple different things to reverse the odds. But if all else fails, use wind blades. And now for the negatives. They're shurikens. Yeah, these things are responsible for both the good and the bad. You can see why they're so divisive. So I like what these projectiles force us to do, but it's at the cost of clarity, because the visual clutter gets pretty horrendous at times, and that's because they explode on impact if they happen to miss you and connect with the nearby geometry. But if we compare that to NGB, they still had to burn through their fuse no matter what it connects with. So why doesn't that work the same here? Why do the stages follow a different rule than us? Yeah, that consistency these projectiles once had in NGB no longer exists. Which leads to messier visuals, unfortunately. But again, I really like what they accomplished. It's just their execution is a bit messy. But I would like to propose an alternative. So to me, the main purpose of the IS ninjas is to make sure you always stay mobile, force a reaction, and they make sure you take damage at all times. So with that in mind, if Ninja Gaiden ever wanted to revisit this idea, which they should, I think the Akujiki from the Shinobi reboot would be perfect, because that life drain mechanic puts this timer above our heads, which instantly encourages, or better yet, demands peak efficiency. So in theory, it'll still have the same effect on gameplay, but with none of the drawbacks of the IS spam. I know Razor's Edge messed with this idea, but it was in select areas and there are more or less scripted events. Yeah, this sort of idea would have been awesome to see explored even further. If you have to, you can even keep it exclusive to higher modes if needed. Then it's like fighting DMC1 enemies on DMD, but instead of them getting a buff, we just die. But yeah, I think this life drain timer would have been a nice alternative to achieve the same goal, which is to keep moving and use every tool to minimize damage while being as efficient as possible. And just in general, this sort of timer mechanic would have been super interesting in any action game. It added an extra layer to Kunutigami that I enjoyed, but even before that, this sort of thing was infamous in Street Fighter 2010. But that restraint really pushes your knowledge and execution to the test, which is exactly what Ninja Gaiden is known for. I need to say this right now before we continue, but ninjas hard carry the positives of NG2. They are the perfect enemy to showcase what this new combat system has to offer. I do have my personal nitpicks with them, but what they encourage is absolutely genius and the reason to play the game. And I'll just leave it there for now. Onto mages. They still teleport around. Now in the past, we would wait for them to get in close. Well, that doesn't work anymore, because they tend to grab you once they reappear. Instead, it's best to stay on the move. So repeat dash jumps and keep tossing aerial shurikens. This will make sure we don't get grabbed since we're in the air, and the shurikens will tell us where they're at, or at least tag other nearby enemies as we wait for them to reappear. We want to see, or better yet, hear, their chanting. That's our sign they're about to summon this flame pillar beneath you, or shoot a few fireballs. Cool thing is, they are completely defenseless in that moment, so quickly make your way in with the Flying Swallow. Dragon Sword works perfectly fine early game, but once you have either a level 2 Lunar or level 2 Talons, I recommend you only use those weapons on them going forward. These two will be your go-to answers against them pretty much every time. And since they drop Essence, yeah, the 360 Lunar UT is also killer. We can also Wind Path to interrupt them, pray to prep those on landings too, right? Or Guillotine Throw if they're near a wall. And if you can't make it in time, just keep moving until you avoid their attack. Then close in to punish their end lag with the Flying Swallow. To continue with long range attacks, archers and rocket launchers. For these guys, we also want to stay on the move. However, don't beeline towards them. It's best to do zigzag movements to make it a bit harder for them to hit you. But here's an important detail to keep in mind. Be sure to hold down that guard at all times. It'll guard buffer if they do manage to hit you, and from there we can just cancel that block stun with the dash step or reblock to get a move on. Oh, and also, never leave the ground for the most part, because if you go in the air, you're just an easy target for their borderline hit scan attacks. And we can't block while we're up there either, right? So keep your feet on the floor as you take ground. Now once we're decently close enough, do a final dash step into Wind Run. It's great as our final approach since it chains iframes. I usually use the Talon Flying Swallow into a Zuno drop because it goes pretty far and way more instant compared to the Lunar. So don't dash jump around like Ninja Gaiden 1, instead just repeat dash step until you get in close. For rocket launchers, it's more or less the same thing. Keep moving left to right to be a trickier target. They only shoot in a straight line too, so it's best to stay in motion. And yeah, do the same Talon Flying Swallow to a Zuno drop finisher. There will be times where we have to shoot him down with the bow. We'll take time because we can't do anything unless it's a UT, unfortunately. So try your best to use the environment as cover as you prep these. For dogs, these killers are a pretty big problem for us because they're extremely agile, appear in large groups, and deal insane damage with their incendiaries and grab. So yeah, standing still isn't a smart idea, but to make them extremely easy, all you need to do is dash jump away, toss mid-air shurikens, then end things with an on-landing rotate Y with the Lunar, then repeat. It really is that simple and even works on Master Ninja. This movement prevents you from being surrounded, you can't be grabbed in the air, and you avoid all the projectiles being tossed your way too. And for that rotate heavy, you don't even have to worry about it being an ET or UT, and that's because the regular uncharged version has hyper armor, so they can't even interrupt us if they tried. Plus, this giant hitbox is large enough to keep them away as well, so they can't even get their paws on us. But yeah, keep releasing these 360 heavies attacks as soon as you touch the floor, no matter if there's essence nearby or not, because you'll always win that interaction. And once there is essence, then yeah, things only get easier because we're doing a full auto combo that can't whiff, with full iframes too. So stay on the move and spam on landing 360Y with the Lunar. That's it. Vangalves will be our first major fiend. They're larger, a bit slower, and definitely more tankier with their hyper armor. They have a leap, which is probably their most dangerous move, a 2-hit combo, this get off double slam, sweeping flames if you're close, and fireballs if they're really far away. Here's what we can do so they don't even get to play the game. So with the Lunar, just a simple light will deal them pretty much every time. Can end with a heavy for a chance to decap, but the first 2 lights will be more than enough. And remember that guard resets from NG1? Well yeah, you can still do those and repeat these until something gets lopped off. Then move in for that OT. Or we can use the dog strategy, which is my go-to strat once things get rolling. So dash jump away, toss an aerial IS, then end things off with an on-landing 360Y. They're a bit slower compared to dogs, so you can definitely attempt to charge an ET at the very least. Now once the charge attack is over, there's a high chance we killed at least one thing out there. So we'll be able to use their dropped essence to quickly follow up with another UT. From there it's all about chaining them until everything's dead. As you can tell, this loop is insanely powerful. The initial hit of the IS will stagger, the explosion will sever a limb, also has a chance to hit other enemies with that splash damage, and the rotate heavy also has a chance to deal them as we're in hyper armor, or better yet, as we're covered in 9 frames. And don't worry about using a lot of IS either, because there's usually a free refill somewhere on these Vangalv heavy stages. And even if there isn't, these UTs will give us so much money to restock at the next shop. There's also Golden Galvs. They're a more elite version, but the same strategies work like Lunar Light and IS spam. But you shouldn't forget about the talents forward Y into OT. So if you're ever in a cramped area, then this can help to quickly take control of the situation. Oh, and if they're off flying around shooting fireballs, just use Inferno to anti-air or charge a 360 Lunar UT and release once they prep their swooping attack. For the next fiend, the Lycans. Same as Vangalvs, these guys are bigger, slower, and have hyper armor. But here's the thing, they pretty much always storm into the room as an entire group. Because of that, it's a good idea to learn their trigger points and prep a UT as they funnel in. It's just optimal gameplay. Would recommend using a dual blade UT for these moments, since it absolutely shreds. Thing is though, it can end earlier if it doesn't connect with something during its onslaught. So that's why it's great for these cramped areas, since it's more easier to connect every attack. But even if you don't learn their spawns to get these early setups, they're honestly kinda dumb. They really do just let you charge UTs right in front of them. And it isn't as risky as you would think, because our charge times are drastically faster compared to NG1. In the past, it was a calculated risk to attempt a raw UT during a fight, but in the sequel, not so much. So it's a good strategy to create that distance and prep on landings. But try not to stay there charging for too long, because they'll either leap towards you or toss their limbs, which really hurts you by the way, and that's because of the counter hit system. So if you're hit during your startup, you'll receive extra damage. Pretty neat. But again, they do tend to wait for a long time before acting at all. So you should have a charge attack ready to release on reaction. But yeah, Lunar is also great against them. Just use a light since it's basically a guaranteed deal them, so move in for the OT right after, which guarantees yellow essence drops to start chaining UTs again. And the classic dash jump away, aerial IS, then all landing Ts work amazing as well. That 360 UT ends with a decap, so it's great against these guys too since they're insta-kill. But you know, if they were already dead from being double de-limbed from the IS explosion and the multiple swings during the Lunar charge attack. Yeah, nothing rarely survives this loop. You can start to see why Lunar is the MVP of this game. Now after fighting those Lycans for the first time, we see Gajas soon after. And yep, try to learn their spawns because it gives us the upper hand soon as we begin the fight. And as you can tell, the Lunar will also be our go-to weapon against them. Doing XX is great to deal them for an easy OT follow-up. But oh yeah, dash jump away, toss an IS, which staggers, deals big damage, and guarantees a deal. Then follow that up with an online 360 UT to sweep away this forming crowd, which also has a good chance to deal them. This crazy combo has very little downsides and really does work on multiple enemy types, different group sizes, and very effective on every difficulty. So it's well worth doing whenever possible. And if you don't have essence to chain with, then I strongly recommend you do the dash jump into wind run, then XXY in the air to do the scooping Azuna drop. This entire process is pretty safe since we're just chaining iframes. But it also insta-kills, most of the time. Won't kill on higher difficulties, but it's very damaging. And surprisingly, they seem to never punish me after that Azuna drop either. Well, nowhere near as much as those ninjas would. So as long as you guard buffer, you should be more than fine to spam this. And if things are getting too hectic, you can also use wind blades to take your turn back. Oh, and for the attacks, all you need to worry about is their high jump tail slam. It's unblockable and deals pretty big damage. But if you're playing the game as intended, then you should never see these to begin with, but other than that, they're very simple. And look who's made a return. So we don't see Ghostfish as much compared to 1, and the flail is no longer my go-to weapon for them either. It's actually the Lunar. Surprise, surprise. Okay, so you usually see them far off before they make a move, so to make things easy, just shoot one of them with an arrow, and this will bait the rest of them to rush you down. So now they'll just swim right into your arms as you mash a neutral heavy attack with the Lunar. Pretty easy. If you get grabbed, just mash the face buttons, and I swear spinning the left thumbstick helps as well, so do both. For those hoverbots or executors, I use a scythe when they're on land. UT is great if you know where they're coming from, but I really like to dash jump into wind run, then aerial XY with the scythe, and repeat until they're done because this has a lot of iframes and deals big damage. Just be sure to guard buffer to block their bullets, and once it's over, just continue the loop again. But when they're on water, I use talons instead. Once close, press X and then mash Y. That entire combo will kill right then and there, but it also keeps you moving afterwards. So it's quick and effective, which is exactly what we want. Speaking of returning enemies, we go up against zombies again, but they have a few upgrades since we last saw them. Got a chainsaw on one arm and a cannon for the other. Yeah, they're more capable for all ranges, but here's the thing, they're still zombies. So you're able to charge UTs right in front of them with very little pushback. They can do a little kick grab, a rising slash, or fire a cannonball if we're far away. But their startup is quite lengthy for us to always get the AT out at the very least. So again, you really shouldn't be getting hit by any of their options, and with our extremely fast charges, we can rip them apart with Tonfa, dual blades, or 360 Lunar UT. Especially the Tonfas, since their initial dash is by far the best in the game, just zipping across the room. But since they're so passive, well, compared to everything else, you can also walk up to them and do light with the Lunar, then going for the OT. And depending on the stage, Scythe UT is a solid option as well. Yeah, they're slow, usually clumped up, and just large targets to easily land all these attacks without issue. Now these worms are by far the most unfun enemy yet. Pretty spongy, way too many show up at once, and their arenas usually have an added hazard, which is perfectly fine on their own, but it just outstays their welcome because these enemies force fights to be dragged out for so long. We don't fight them too many times luckily, but they definitely stick around for a long time. So to avoid the poison, you can spam Scythe UTs from a safe distance, or you can toss IS because one of the fights have an infinite refill. So I try to use both to speed things up as fast as possible. But even then, it'll take forever because of their large health pools and the fact they're not eliminable. So no OT kills to speed things along. But if I'm getting impatient, I dash step into wind run, then do XYY with the scythe. Damaging enough, has iframes, and fully connects since they're pretty stationary. Yeah, they only get more health and more spawns on higher difficulties, and we can't even skip most of the fights either, which sucks. So you better get used to them. Next up are Mecha Fiends, and these are pretty rare too. It's best to know their spawns and prep a neutral Scythe UT. It won't kill, but it does a good job at delimiting. So get in there and OT. They do explode after dying though, hurts too. You can take the guard crush damage, but I usually try to time a dash step into run to avoid it. And if they're not going down, I repeat the usual scythe combo. Dash step, run, aerial XYY, and so they're done. Wind blades are amazing too since it's a guaranteed delim, and they really like to beeline towards you with their thrusters. So since they're right on our face and our big body, yeah, the wind blades can take them down pretty quick. For marionettes, I use a scythe quite a bit. Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said the lunar, talons, and scythe will be the go-to weapons. Yeah, they usually show up far away from us. So I like to prep a scythe UT to send out these power geysers their way. And just like fiend mechas, this usually delims as well. Then you can make your way in to finish the job. But they usually approach us on their own with their diagonal dive attack. Sorta goes further than it looks to, so it's even more reason why I hang back with my scythe just charging UTs to chip them down from afar. But if you do want to close the gap, you can probably guess what I'm gonna say, but I do dash step into rim run and XXY with the scythe. Chains iframes as we move in, but it also gets us close enough to do that OT right after. Actually, the Tonfa's charge attack can work too because of their travel distance. That's a great way to punish their dive attempts. So yeah, keep away and prep UTs from afar. That's the way to beat these guys. Next are red dragons. Now for these guys, just do a wind path as soon as you can. It'll interrupt them, but will also bait out their tail sweep every time, which leaves them vulnerable. So dash through it and punish with a full heavy scythe combo. Its range is massive, so it'll connect with ease. And yeah, repeat. You also have a flame attack, but just like NG1, it's quite long-winded. So do that full heavy combo and squeeze in another hit or two before it ends. Or dash jump away and prep an on-landing UT. You also have a grab, but the wind path should be interrupting it every time. But just like the worms, they are not delimitable and have a lot of health. So if they're ever a bore to fight since they don't lean into NG2's unique strengths, just know you can run past them to drop into Z2's boss fight soon after. Then centaurs. These things will beeline towards you in hordes. Not only that, but their spear has insane range. So be ready to get poked by all these different timings or grabbed off screen. Really, the best thing to do is use Inferno. Pretty much instant kills whatever we hit. But it also starts our essence chain with Scythe UT. Yeah, honestly, these guys are one of my least favorite enemies right next to the worms. But luckily, we only see them 2 or 3 times in the entire game. So to avoid the headache, just spam that info to get past them as soon as possible, since they have a lot of health and they are not delimitable. Yeah, so to be honest with you guys, some of these encounters aren't the most enjoyable in general. The bridge fight with those lesser Quetzalcoatls, shooting respawning jellyfish, shooting fiend bats with slow UTs, dealing with damage sponge worms, and so on. These fights stick out like a sore thumb because these guys suffer from long time to kill. Either because of the projectile UTs having long charge times, or they can be delimbed, or they have insane health pools that only get larger on the higher modes. So there's some pretty bad encounter design from time to time that only get worse when you climb the difficulty ladder. And there's a few other shifts. So with the change to have such large amount of enemies on screen, it does 2 things. 1, we no longer have the luxury to interact with enemies. So the back and forth we saw in NGB no longer exists. Because if they attack, even just once, we're already doing something wrong. To play NG2 as intended and as efficiently as possible, we need to make sure it's our turn at all times. This is no longer a choreographed fight like before. This sequel is about being a one-man show. Of course, the initial rush is pretty great when you first play the game, but once that high wears off, you realize there's no time for us to engage with each enemy since there's too many bodies on screen. So the focus is moved away from the individual enemy and placed on the number of the crowd. The size of the group is what's dangerous now, not the unique properties and counterplay like 1. That's why the strategy is the same across the board no matter what we fight. Because again, the crowd is the enemy, not what it's made of. And this only gets more clear once you played Master Ninja. They just add more enemies to create larger groups. But they don't add new moves or advanced behaviors like NGB. Like how they would punish your flying swallow spam, or how they would punish your end lag if you only mashed lights. So there's no more counterplay from the enemies. Here, it's all about the size of the crowd, and the size alone. That's where the challenge comes from. Because one-on-one, these enemies are pretty dumb and very simple. Or for some enemies, not fully completed since the game was notoriously rushed out early. So this change of a counter design in enemy composition has its amazing peaks with the ninjas and mages, but for the rest of the cast, it just doesn't work out the same. And since the majority of the game isn't fighting those ninjas, yeah, it's exactly why there's more valleys than peaks. The saving grace of these larger crowds is the amount of damage they can deal, and delimbs, if that's even possible. So we can't be caught sleeping at the wheel because there's still a force to be reckoned with. Then there's delimbs to lead to quick kills to maintain that short time to kill, and glass cannon balancing to everyone in the room. That right there is something every action game needs to do in some way. But even then, Ninja Gaiden 2 doesn't even follow its own rules 100% of the time. Okay, here's the second thing that these larger crowds do. It makes UT chaining so much more viable and easier to do. With so many bodies on screen now, the amounts of essence we'll see at any given moment is leagues ahead of NGB. So it means we're able to UT spam like never before. And why wouldn't you? The goal now is to chip away at these large crowds, and these UTs allow us to do just that. Even without essence, the shortened charge times make this easier as well. And compare that to NG1 where it had slower charges in general. So we had to earn every ET or UT we tossed out. And since essence in NGB was more scarce in comparison, it had more weight to whether or not we absorbed that full multiplied value or made that compromise to take a fraction to continue the UT chain. So fewer enemies per encounter meant less opportunity to gain essence throughout the game. That right there made us put some effort into routing our money and make sure we collected those bigger orbs. But that thought process isn't required nearly as much in the sequel. And that's because we have heaps of enemies with every single fight. That risk-reward decision making with essence no longer exists. So resource management is a thing of the past as well. And again, it's all because of the sheer amount of enemies we have throughout the game. To me, they're just walking ATMs now instead of varied enemies. So at a baseline, we're getting way more money than ever before, even if we take the fraction of the value by constantly using them to prep our next UT. Then with higher modes adding even more enemies, it gives us more reason to use those UTs to get rid of them, which also gives a crap ton of money by the end since there's more essence getting dropped at any given time. So yeah, that's the loop the game created for itself. So as I said before, UTs are just optimal because of their insane value. Now don't get me wrong, I'm having a blast chaining my UTs. For me, the new dynamic closer mimics the Shinobi reboots rather than NGB. How every fight begins as this uphill battle, but with each kill, we get this ever-increasing damage boost that allows us to clear those crowds in an instant, just as long as we maintain the momentum. And to me, essence chaining can fall into that same description. So with the key changes to shorten charges, having an emphasis on larger crowds, and more essence to go around in general, UTs have just become the perfect counterplay to the game's new approach to enemy design. So it just seems too intentional. Now you can add an arbitrary rule to not use it, but I don't think players should remove basic functions from their arsenal. It's a core mechanic and it should be used. Refusing to use those UTs is like refusing to use Tate. It's how the game is meant to be played. Because where do we draw the line? Are we going to cut out high dealing moves, OTs, Nimpo, flying swallows, inner drop, getting to throw, the ability to block, or worse yet, removing wind run because it's just too powerful and fundamental to make NG's combat work? So it just becomes a slippery slope once we begin to remove basic tools for being good at their job. But that's what they're there for, right? Okay, on to bosses. So the time to kill is still very much intact. So if you find these fights to be tedious, have some relief knowing they won't last too long. Well, neither will you if you don't pay attention. So that alone is why I actually don't mind these boss fights, but we'll go more into that a bit later. So for Resetsu, he'll usually rush you down at the start, and you can tell he's about to do that whenever he leans forward, and then he'll crawl towards you and do a forward lunge once he's close. This can be blocked, but you can also dash step through it and then punish. You can also do this forward cartwheel into double gut punch. You can block the first one, but be sure to dash step past the second one so you can for sure punish afterwards. And for our punish, we're going to use a lunar, of course. But be sure to do light, guard reset, then a single light attack to end things off. Now I don't do the more damaging XXY because Resetsu here is pretty damn good at punishing our end lag with the command grab. So it's best to be as consistent and safe as possible. But alright, as you do this combo, you should be holding guard at all times, which shouldn't be too bad. We're guard canceling as it is, so we're going to be holding down left trigger pretty often. And yeah, we make sure to do this because he has two different attacks to get us or himself away. So it might be this 4-hit combo that ends with a kick, which yep, he's punishable afterwards, or he'll do a backstep into a forward lunge. He doesn't always do that lunge attack, but anticipate it every time. And get used to that because this pattern is carried over to many bosses going forward. Anyways, in neutral, he might do the crawl we saw at the beginning, where he will do this high jump, landing right on top of you. For that, I just dashed up into run to chain iframes. Then do an aerial XY. Just guard buffer and be sure to create some distance from his potential grab. Now if you hang back for too long, he'll do the scream, which is our cue he's self-healing. If you can, dash step into run, then do XXY to punish him. Just be sure to guard buffer like last time. He's actually a fun fight that has great towels, which has end lag afterwards, and leads to an actual back and forth. Pretty good stuff in my opinion. And lucky for me, we have ourselves a rematch. While it's not the same guy, but Gyuki has the exact patterns. But here's the twist, there's added backup. So when the fight begins, immediately charge that 360 heavy attack. You can usually get a full ET charge before anything hits you, but there is a chance you can prep that full UT as well. It can be tricky though, because he might attack early. Yeah, just release whenever Gyuki gets close, or when a ninja gets close. This should either deal big damage to the boss, or clear the backup at the very least. After the animation ends, back away with dash steps, as you continue to hold guard. Then try your best to prep an all-landing 360 UT with the now dropped essence from those ninjas we killed earlier. If that's not possible, and you must fight the backup, use the Lunars scooping a Zuna drop or the Talons flying swallow into a Zuna drop. Then with that essence, try to prep another all-landing. Guillotine throw to OT is solid as well because of all these nearby walls. And to help with fighting extra enemies in these boss fights, know that you can press the right bumper to drop the soft lock on. So it'll remove the focus from the boss, and now you can have the standard free camera. So now it should be easier to go for those ninjas. Oh, if you have it, just spam Nimpo to either deal big damage to Gyuki or get rid of the swarming crowd. It's time to cross swords with Genshin for the very first time. Okay, for him, we're going to use a classic Mirai strat, which means keep that range because it'll bait out his most vulnerable moves. But as we do this, be sure to keep holding guard and only dash step as you reposition. Never jump in this boss fight because he'll anti-air you. So just dash step as you guard while waiting for Genshin to make the first move. Simple as that. Now those moves you want to see is his very own Flying Swallow. And yep, as long as you are blocking, he's left in recovery. So punish with the Lunars XXY. Then back away with the usual guarding dash steps. He also has his forward moving spiral attack, but as I mentioned before, as long as you were holding block, you can guard it and punish with the same Lunar XXY. Then yeah, back to neutral as we wait for his next attack. Another far off attack he has is his quick rush down, but he does lean forward before shooting off. Think of it as Doku, very similar idea. And just like that move, this is also punishable. Now here's a very important detail to know about this fight and every rematch with him going forward. He will dodge out of every other punish. So after that full XXY combo, keep in mind that he'll backflip out of your next punish, which means you should bait a reaction with that single light attack and anticipate his retaliation. And yeah, he will either do the established backstep into a forward rush attack, which is punishable afterwards, so we'll be able to punish not too long afterwards, or he'll start to swing doing a little combo. I usually don't mess with this and prioritize regaining center stage. But there are two melee combos I do look out for. The startup is very hard to react to, but as long as you are holding block, again, you should be more than fine as long as you react and dash step away. Okay, whenever I see him do 3 consecutive gut punches with the same claw hand, I know he's about to follow up with a spinning ender, so be ready to dash step past it and punish. And for the second combo, he will do these slow vertical attacks that end with a forward moving spin. So space yourself and then time your dash to avoid that ender, and then punish. Giga Death. While I like the look of this boss, this whole metallic fish design reminds me of shmups, but it's pretty meh. But before we get into that, be sure to have the bow and the lunar equipped. So swap to them as soon as you finish that Vanguard fight right before this boss. As soon as the fight begins, hold B and aim down sights. And before releasing, try your best to aim for the face to deal extra damage. You might be able to squeeze in a second bow UT, but it's up to chance if that'll work out in your favor. Sometimes he'll speed up, or he'll just stop behind cover. So this second shot isn't always guaranteed, but you can dash jump behind this set to column. then prep an on-landing 360 UT as you wait for Giga Death to approach. And that's because being too close to him will send out these tracking electrical blasts. So this UT will help avoid his proximity attack at the very beginning of the fight. Anyways, after that opening, follow behind him and place yourself on the right hand wall, then stop right by this orange light. Now we'll be at this wall for the rest of the fight, so as he's turning around, land a few bow UTs. But once he starts to cross the halfway point, start moving forward, and that's because he can fire these straight on projectiles. So if you were still standing at the far end of the tunnel, he'll most likely hit you since the spread covers the entire range of the tunnel. And yeah, that makes it very tricky to escape once you're caught in that crossfire. But if we stayed on the side of him at all times, those shots will completely miss us. So that's why we want to move forward and get ourselves into that blind spot. Now he does stop moving before shooting, so that's helpful, but unfortunately, he doesn't have a towel before sending out those barrage of fishes. Can swat him away with a heavy lunar string or use Nimpo, but you most likely will get hit if you're in this blind spot. There's just not enough time to react to that non-existent telegraph. At least it's the lesser of the three evils, because he can also send out this face. It will track you, but it does have a wide arc, so you can walk to kind of avoid it, but you can also use Inferno once it gets close. Sometimes it's not worth taking the chance. But that's it. It's a rough fight, but for the wrong reasons. Slow time to kill because of the bow UTs, and it really needs better cues. So best of luck because this thing is kind of a mess. Kodomos. Make your way forward, get beneath him, and hold block. Once he does that slam attack, reblock, dash, and then punish with the Lunar's XXY. But do 2 more light attacks before holding guard. We can squeeze in those extra hits and still have time to block his next ground pound, which again leaves him open for that same string. Yeah, it's a very simple pattern, and lucky for us, there's no chip damage from some sort of guard crush attacks, and he doesn't even have an unblockable move like a grab. So we can just stand here, try to aim for the back leg, guard the slam attack, reblock, and then punish. For Alexei 1, we're going to use the tried and true strategy. So let's keep our distance and bait out his most vulnerable moves. Okay, being this far will cause him to do one or two things. He will either do this tornado spin towards us, has a bit of wind up as it slowly moves forward before shooting off. But to more easily avoid it, do a dash step into wind run. Say it with me because it extends our iframes. But yeah, because of that, I found it to be very consistent to avoid it. Thing is, we can't punish him afterwards, so just dash step away twice. Now, he also has a swooping grab. This is what we want to see. So time your single dash step or dash jump, then punish with the Lunar XXY. Has the range, and most importantly, the damage to really make this hurt. Once the combo ends, dash jump away, then do 1 more dash. This should be the perfect spacing to get us where we want to be. And if you're ever in those close quarter fights, just know he has a 3-hit combo that's punishable with the same XXY. He has a grab that's punishable as well, which, just like Resetsu, will be done with his left arm. So watch for the right side of the screen, basically. But yeah, don't be too greedy, create the space, and just wait your turn. For the water dragon, we begin on this little platform. It's sort of like the worm boss from 1 mixed with the helicopter, because we're going to be using the bow as we react to every towel. So to make things easy, hug the right side of the platform as far as you can. Doing this will avoid that whip geyser attack with no effort. So whenever you see that startup, just answer back by charging the bow UT. And I usually go for a second bow UT, but it's also a good idea to shoot once and then wait for the next attack just in case. The water beam is a pretty tricky attack to avoid, but what helped me was looking at the rings it creates. Once I see the second one, that's when I dash step to the side. And from there, just do 1 bow UT. Then return to the corner as we wait for the next attack. Occasionally he'll dive into the water, doing a little dunk, but just like the worm in 1, this won't hurt us. Well, as long as we're on this platform, of course. So just prep your bow UT and wait for it to re-emerge. And just like the helicopter, it'll place itself in the same spot every time. So you'll get the feel for it eventually. And gives us enough time to land 2 full bow UTs. Yeah, we want to see this one the most. But speaking of which, do you guys see what I mean about the slow time to kill with a bow? We need to wait for the UT before we can do anything of worth. While in NGB, we can shred the helicopter in an instant, We just needed to aim and fire. That's it. But anyways, it also sends out these icicles. And this is why I upgraded those dual blades at the start of this chapter. Because at level 2, we get the rotate Y, which has iframes. So it's a really good dodge since it lasts for a long time and it's stationary. Here's the thing, I hold the left thumbstick down towards the screen, then do the full rotation. If you begin the input by pointing towards the boss, there is a chance you can walk off, and we don't want that. So point away from him and it should be more safe and consistent. For me it was anyways. So just keep this up until he does an attack that we can actually punish. Drunken Skeleton. Instantly dash jump to the side, because there's a chance he'll kick bones at you as soon as the fight begins. So the dash step will help avoid that. But it also preps our on-landing 360 UT, which I release on reaction whenever he's close or when he's about to attack. On higher modes there's backup added, but even then this opener works all the same. Actually, I prefer fighting him on those later difficulties because of those minions. They just give us a ton of essence to chain through the fight. But yeah, once you attack him, you'll notice he's not taking much damage. Well, he's sort of like Pazu from 1, so we need to attack his ankles long enough to break his invisible stagger stun bar. But once we do, he'll be knocked down. Now we have an opening to deal actual damage. Okay, since his weak spot is in the middle of his chest, so try to get in front of him. From here, I'll dash step, run, then XXY with the lunar. Once you land, do it a second time. This should do some big damage if positioned correctly. It can be hard to find those openings though, whenever he leans forward and grabs bones off the floor, or when he stands straight up just staring blankly up at the ceiling. Those two moments are your cues to prep UTs. Besides that, you need to do very little attacks as you avoid his wide sweeps, kicks, and grab. And stay more towards the backside. It makes things a tiny bit easier. Wolf 1. He also starts the fight by rushing you down, so we need to act quick. The way to avoid it, as we do most things, is with a dash step into run. Then once I land, I instantly do a forward hold Y with the dual blades. And yeah, we basically won the fight as soon as we dodge that first move. And to make this easier, you don't even have to reset the left thumbstick back to neutral. So after the initial held attack, just keep the stick pointed at Wolf. From here I press and hold Y as soon as his arm stretches out horizontally. So all I need to do is aim the stick towards him and time my held button press. And that's it. He does have a very small chance to break out, but if he does, just keep guarding into dash steps until his combo ends. Then go back to doing forward hold Y. Or you can just run away and bait out the rush attack again. Either way, he's a very exploitable boss once we land the first hit. Time to fight Genshin for a second time, but with backup. So like I mentioned before, be sure to press the right bumper to remove that boss lock-on. From here, now we can focus on the minions. You can use Nimpo or the Talon's Flying Swallow into a Zuno drop. Now once you land, prep a guard buffer, dash step away into run, then Flying Swallow again. They do have a set amount of spawns, and they're not tied to the boss's house like in GB, so just keep taking them out until they stop dropping in. Yeah, it's best to focus the ninjas at the start and ignore Genshin at the beginning. Once they've been cleared out, it's a simple 1v1 fight. And yeah, same stuff as before. It's about waiting for an opening and punish with the lunars XXY. Just be sure to remember to switch the camera modes to focus on him again. As soon as Genshin 2 ends, we're immediately dropped into Armadillo 1. And for this guy, all we need is a good amount of IS. So be sure you're fully restocked at the shop right before Genshin 2. But alright, be sure to space yourself away from him as you toss these out. And that's because he has grab, which I think has hyper armor. So be far enough to avoid his attacks, but close enough so the auto aim will land headshots. Speaking of which, try your best to face him head on. It'll raise the chances of starting the loop. And once you do, just keep mashing B. Eventually he'll break out to activate that desperation phase, but keep throwing those IS. And that's because he's still being stuck by them. So once that hyper armor animation ends, the explosions will hit him as soon as he's vulnerable again. And yeah, locks him down to continue the loop all over again. Now, once he's dead, be sure to hold that guard, and don't let it go. Godomos also gets a rematch, but he's still the same straightforward mini-boss. So the same exact strategy as before, XXY with the lunar, and then squeeze in 2 more lights before blocking the slam attack. But here's the thing, after passing a specific health threshold, he will get backup. For these guys, I just use wind blades. I press my luck by letting them get kinda close to make sure I really hit them. And once the boss is dead, just know the fight isn't over even after you kill him. You need to get rid of the rocket launchers on the far ends as well. Zindonius won. He usually starts the fight with this high jump into a slam. As soon as he goes off screen, that's when I do the classic dash step into wind run. Lots of iframes, and the wind run will place us right next to him with its auto targeting. Lucky for us, he's punishable afterwards. So let's do the famous scythe rotate Y. And yeah, as you can tell, this works like a charm. It takes a bit of rhythm, but nothing too crazy. Just decently timed rotations, and no charging required. Pretty simple. But pay attention to how many times he gets knocked away. If it's just one time, then he should be close enough for the next spin to connect. But if that one 360 heavy attack pushed him away twice, then dashed up to close the gap. But in general, whenever he gets knocked away 2 times, always be sure to dash step afterwards. So be sure to keep the distance pretty short because it'll make things way more easier. But if he does break out, he'll usually fly away. And he has 2 far off attacks, sending out either fireballs or a flame geyser right beneath you. But both are avoidable with 2 dash steps to the side, with similar timings as well. He does have a few grounded attacks, like a 1-2 combo starting with a kick, and a few flame attacks. He also has a grab, which has the same towel as every other boss. I actually really appreciate that design consistency. So yeah, just watch out for his left arm and punish with Lunar, XXY, or a full heavy combo with other weapons. But with this 360 spin with the scythe, you really shouldn't see any of these other attacks. It really is that easy. And now for the Death Worm. You've probably heard the horror stories about this one, how it was so bad that it was removed from all future versions of the game. Yeah, if Gigadeath was able to stay, you can only imagine how awful this thing can be. And well, it's actually not too bad. Would rather fight this thing than Gigadeath, that's for sure. But anyways, as we walk down this tunnel, there's a few pill bugs to deal with, and side pockets for extra refills if needed. Now as you walk along, pay attention to the far end of this tunnel, because you'll be able to see the worm start to move towards us before the boss music even kicks in. So once you notice that, be quick to hide away in the side area to let him move on by. Now, step outside and quickly set up a 360 Lunar UT. Sometimes I make sure no stray pill bugs are close by to mess with me, but you should be fine most times. If there is one though, just kill it with the Lunar XXY, go back to hiding, then wait for the worm to pass by. Okay, as we're charging this 360 UT, the worm is about to run through here again. Which side that is will be completely random, but that's why we're doing the Lunar's 360 charge attack. It will hit all sides and will fully play out even if you whiffed, so timing is a non-issue. And that detail is important because we can release a little early just in case. Now when to release is also pretty straightforward. Just pay attention to the screen shake. Once it becomes pretty intense, yeah, that's my cue to release. And then I let the auto targeting do the rest. Soon as that UT ends though, I guard buffer for a brief moment, and I do mean brief. Basically till I see Ryu lift up his weapon fully, which is still a little too long, but a good timer for myself either way. After prepping that guard buffer, I quickly dash forward, do my wind run, and XXY with the Lunar. Broken record, but we're chaining iframes to avoid that grab or his spit attack. And when done properly, this single string should send him running away. And once he does, quickly prep another 360 UT, wait for the intense screen shake, release once it gets crazy, and repeat. It's actually not too bad. Alright, we have some more projectile based bosses. Soon as the fight begins, use Void. Since the pathing is always the same at the start, there's a consistent setup to deal easy damage. So quickly get the white line of the waterfall right in the middle of our reticle, and have the bottom of the reticle touch the edge of the arena. Sounds a little complicated, but find any visual cues that helps you the best, because this is just free damage. Now from here, it's a waiting game, so keep an eye out for when he stops and lifts his head up. That's how we know it's about to stay still and prep an attack, which gives us the perfect chance to use another Void. You can attempt to land bow UTs in the meantime, but that's up to you. Now once it's down to just one, lesser versions come out to help. From here I just jump around shooting the in-air bow. Little risky to stand still now with so many projectiles coming our way, so I just let the auto aim do the rest as I look for the boss's next towel. And again, don't use Nimpo unless they stop and prep an attack, because they like to do fake outs from time to time. Well then, let's fight one of them this time. But just like before, its pathing is always the same. Okay, at the start, it'll approach our platform. So once we have control, dash forward, maybe take a few steps, then do a complete heavy combo with the scythe. It absolutely shreds the health bar. After that, immediately charge a bow UT and fire away once ready. And since it always stops on the left hand side to shoot the fireball, just buffer avoid Nimpo to delete this boss in one consistent combo. For Elizabeth 1, she has awakened Alma syndrome, so don't expect a fair fight. But lucky for us, we can fight fire with fire. So for now, keep spamming Talon's Flying Swallow, doing dash step into wind run into Flying Swallow. It actually does solid damage and even has a chance to stun lock her over and over. But yeah, keep this up until she breaks out with the backflip, and as we know, she'll follow up with the rush attack. Now what we really want to see are those blood orbs, since we can interrupt them. So quickly move in and land a Flying Swallow with the Dragon Sword. There's a chance she'll just tank the hit, but just keep it up until it connects. And once it does, it'll cause a stagger, making her kneel on the floor. Now once that happens, we pretty much won the fight, because we can start our loop. So swap to the flails and do XXY over and over. Yeah, that's it. Takes a bit of rhythm, but it's a guaranteed kill no matter what the difficulty. Genshin 3. For this fight he loses the backup, so it's back to a 1v1 fight again. For the most part, nothing's different, so stick to the fundamentals. Stay in that mid-range, hold guard at all times, only dash step, wait for him to make the first move, land that lunar XXY for the punish combo, and remember he'll skip after every other punish. Only thing you need to keep an eye for are a few extra combos that he can end a bit earlier, but once you see that uppercut finisher, then it's punishable. From Armadillo to Armaduo. So once the fight begins, just start hammering that fire button as you let the auto aim do its job. Keep this up until either one starts to attack or gets too close. Then it's time to dash step away while still tossing these out. But even then, you should be able to kill one of them soon after. Just don't forget about their self-destruct. But instead of blocking, use Nimpo. For one, it has iframe, so that's good. But I mainly use it to avoid any sneaky attacks, because it's very possible the other one will blindside us with his roll attack. And yeah, that will open us up to that nuclear explosion. So to be on the side of caution, use Nimpo. And then yeah, after that it's back to the usual stuff. So try to face them head on, toss incineries, and repeat. Now we begin the final rematches with those Greater Fiends. And well, zztx is the same as before. So he'll most likely start with the high jump to do that slam attack. And like last time, dash step out and wind run back in for a decent amount of iframes. Once you land, just getting close and spin and win. Just remember he does get pushed away, so be sure to dash step to keep the loop going. And if you think it's broken now, it's only foreshadowing what's to come, or just a continuation of a classic trope. For Wolf 2, he has some backup, but lucky for us, they need time to reach us. So once we get control, immediately dash step backwards and prep an all-landing 360 UT with the scythe. And we do this for two reasons. One, this rotate UT will play the entire animation without having to connect any hits. This is great because centaurs have insane range. So this allows us to release earlier and still win that first interaction. And two, this 360 UT will always end opposite of where you were facing at the start. So by the time it ends, we'll be doing this massive slam attack to hit those surrounding enemies. Yeah, that's why we wanted our back towards them before we did that on landing. Okay, once you see those shadows show up on screen, that's my cue to release. After it ends, start spamming Inferno. These are the perfect counters since it has the range, auto targets, and pretty much insta kills them. So don't hold back from using all your Nimpo to clear out these centaurs. Then use any remaining essence to prep another UT if possible. Once that's over, the 1v1 fight plays out exactly the same. Keep your distance to bait out his leap or rush attack, then avoid it with the dash into wind run, and finish things off by doing the dual blades forward hold wide loop. For Alexei 2, we're going to do the same strategy as before. Keep the distance and wait for the swooping command grab. But at this point of the game we have the true Dragon Sword. It's our highest level weapon now, so I put the extra damage to good use with that entire heavy combo. But the Lunar should be more than fine too. And this time you might actually see his Desperation phase, has all the same attacks still, but just know he'll add more back-to-back swoops, or the tornado will track you a few more times before he's actually vulnerable again. So just hold back a little bit before doing your punish. But other than that, the plans are still the same. Here's our last confrontation with Genshin. But he's a bit different since we last saw him. So even though he's a fiend now, the attacks we're looking for are still here. The Flying Swallow, Spiral, Rush Attack, and so on. It's all the same, but he does get a few new combos. To make things easier to catch on to them, if it ends with a Flaming Uppercut, then it's punishable. And I'll also use the True Dragon Sword as my main weapon here. It can be a bit tricky at times, because it's all about reacting to hit stun, so I'll toss out 2 heavy attacks, and if I'm fully staggered, then I complete the rest of it. But if he hyper armors through it, or breaks out in general, then just hold block and dash step away. And remember, never jump. Just keep your feet on the ground, create that distance, and wait for him to make the first move. And speaking of those breakaways, if he does a large backflip, he'll zip across the arena. He also parries attacks mid-string, so you need to be very aware of his improved defensive game, which also includes these new teleport attacks that has him land right above you. This is punishable most times, especially the fan of flaming shurikens, so I always go in for the heavy combo after these as well. And yeah, once you finish landing that combo, back up and repeat the process. And another thing, standing too close will have him grab or do the shockwave, which is very hard to react to at times. Well, for me anyways. It's definitely nowhere near as telegraphed as Doku's, for example. So this is even more reason to keep your distance, as we always do. This might be a hot take, but I don't think all the bosses are bad. Nowhere near as horrible as it's made out to be anyways. I think that sentiment has been echoed for so long that it's become blown out of proportion, because I've heard this same thing for many years, but I don't think I've ever heard a concrete reason as to why. Now for my tinfoil hat theory, I think the game sets us up for failure. So they changed the focus from a group fight to a one-on-one battle. And how we approach these fights couldn't be even more opposite of each other, because very early on the game makes it pretty clear we're meant to shoot first and ask questions later. That's what the game has taught us this entire time. So as we fight regular enemies, we're conditioned to never let them attack, because if we do, we die. So by the time we reach this boss, we still have that mindset to rush in head first, which is the worst thing we can do, because the bosses are designed completely opposite of those regular enemies. It's actually better to have the NGB mindset, and that's because they're more about pattern recognition, which means we're meant to play more patiently and be observant of specific tells. Then once we evaded their combo or attack, that's our chance to land our punish during their end lag. But yeah, that's where the disconnect is coming from, I think. We have to go from never stop attacking to waiting our turn. And that sort of template has been used by many other memorable boss fights, from Kingdom Hearts, DMC, God Hand, NGB obviously, and so on. They do an attack pattern, we react with our defensive options, and are guaranteed punish during the recovery, but don't mash for too long because they'll break out with either hyper armor or just teleport away, which typically has them answer back with their very own counter attack. Now obviously, there are some stinkers here in NG2. AI is either extremely exploitable or just outright unfinished, but those really bad examples are the exception, not the rule. And again, some of the best bosses around are designed in the exact same way as we see here. So the idea that Ninja Gaiden is known for having nothing but terrible bosses never made sense to me, because they are near identical to many other highly praised bosses in this genre. But maybe I'm not seeing something here, or maybe I have Stockholm Syndrome. I have been playing this game nonstop for 3 months after all, so who knows. It is time for one of those exploitable boss fights, and nothing has changed. Spam the Talon's Flying Swallow until she escapes with that backflip, then be ready to avoid her follow-up attack. And if you see her lean forward, yeah, she's about to dash across the room. Just keep this up until she summons those blood orbs. Once she does, swap to the True Dragon Sword and keep attempting Flying Swallow to knock her down. Then swap again to the flails and loop XXY over and over. For Dagger Die, The fight begins before we even enter the boss room. So in the Vangal-filled tunnels, just ignore them entirely and keep dash jumping along. We avoid interacting with them because doing so would prevent Dagger from summoning them throughout his fight. Thing is though, dying and reloading that boss checkpoint will set things back to normal. That's why I recommend you have the talisman equipped so we can kill him first try. Plus, the strategy we're going to use is extremely reckless and pretty resource heavy. So yeah, having the rebirth helps for a couple of reasons. Alright, for his fight, we're going to use everything. I use the Scythe, Talons, Nimpo, Spirit of the Devils, and a few different items. So, once we gain control, be sure to have the Talons equipped, then instantly do XX, forward X, and mash Y. This will have Ryu teleport to land a few slashes. And cool thing is, we don't even have to connect those first few hits for him to even go up there. And with that knowledge, this would be our go-to string whenever he's hovering around. Just pay attention to your positioning though, because it requires some distance for it to work, and being too close will really mess up targeting. Okay, as he's up there, you'll most likely see two attacks, both of which track you. Since it's tricky to avoid the entire thing from my experience, just do a few dash steps, will always end with an Inferno. Use that to iframe through the final few hits while doing solid damage of your own. Then after that ends, squeeze in those teleporting attacks whenever possible as we wait for him to act again. But he will drop down eventually, and once he does, quickly swap to the Scythe. Dash step towards him, use Wind Run, then XXY. The added light attack helps stall because he might teleport out of the way, so this should keep us lingering long enough to land that final hit at the very least. But yeah, once you land, instantly dash step out, then Wind Run back in to repeat the iframe aerial combo. However, if he starts doing that cone-shaped electrical attack, be sure to Nimpo cancel with Inferno to chain iframes even further. Once that Nimpo ends, quickly dash step into Wind Run, then do that Scythe aerial combo to maintain those iframes. So keep repeating this entire string as he's close to the ground, and only use Nimpo when he uses magic. Now here it is, the final boss of the game. And well, it's pretty easy. Okay, this first form will be a projectile only fight, having 2 weak spots for us to alternate between. So, as soon as we gain control, charge a bow UT and fire away. And here's a tip to trivialize this fight. Do not aim. Touching that left thumbstick to aim manually will only make things harder than it has to be. Instead, rely on the auto aim. It'll know which target is currently active. So there's no need for us to do anything else besides let the targeting do its job. Now once we land that shot, dash jump twice to the right or to the left. And be sure to prep an on-landing bow UT. Doing this will avoid his spit, but also begins our stun lock loop, because the landing of bow UT will stagger and interrupt his next attack, which forces him to spit once again. But as he does that, we're already charging that next UT. So yeah, once that UT is ready, instantly release and get a move on. As you can tell, doing this will guarantee a win since he doesn't get to attack. But he does break out of it eventually. So after dealing enough damage, it'll cause him to lose balance, making his arm slip off, which is our cue he's about to climb up. But before he does, grab that free arrow refill, then hold guard, because he'll swipe his tail, breaking this barrier, which has a very small chance to actually hit you, so just be careful. But yeah, now it's time to follow him upwards with a bit of platforming. It's nothing too crazy like one, but try to keep a nice pace so you won't get hit by one of his attacks. Luckily the layout is the same every time, so you'll get through this in no time. But once you reach the next level to fight again, do not release that bow UT so soon. Wait until he has both hands settled in. Even then, I usually wait a second or two before firing away. I'm extra cautious because he doesn't have an active hurt box just yet, so we need to give it time. But shooting too early can be pretty bad too. Not only do we need to wait for the UT to charge all over again, which runs the risk of letting him attack, then combined with how slow projectile UTs can be, yeah, it can get messy. So have a little patience when you reach that next floor. Other than that little caveat, this phase is solved once we land the first hit. And now, here's the final form. It's not as simple as the first one, but still pretty straightforward. So with this fight, be sure to have the dual blades equipped. And don't worry if you never upgraded it much, because by this point in the game we got the blades of the Archfiend for free. So with that good to go, quickly make your way to the left side of the platform. Doing this will avoid his wide grab and baits out very predictable patterns. The main one being the sweeping beam attack. You can do one forward hold Y during the beam startup, maybe two before it reaches you with the help of shuriken cancels, but yeah, just don't get too greedy and be ready to dodge in time. And I make sure to dash step towards the edge to keep the positioning, and the iframes are long enough to avoid the tail end of the beam. But afterwards, now we have a safe enough window to land a few of these forward hold Ys. He also has ground pounds that create an explosion beneath you. That geyser shows up pretty fast though, so dash step a bit earlier than you might expect. He will do between 2 or 4 of these, but spamming dash steps fast as possible won't work out either. So add a tiny delay between each step to really avoid him successfully. Now, this is completely random, but he can jump onto our platform. And he doesn't really do much, sort of paces back and forth, or just walks into the wall. Well, I use this downtime to spam 360Y for those iframes until he leaves. He can also leave the edge and fly away. Once he does, he can send out fireballs, but doing dash steps will easily avoid him. He can also sweep across the entire floor, but hugging the wall behind us is a safe spot. Or he'll electrify the floor, but a simple jump and projectile stall is all you need to avoid it. Now him leaving to spam these projectiles is also random, so you can get lucky where he just never leaves that one spot for easy hits, or he'll just stay far away for a good while. But yeah, hug the left side, don't be too greedy, just wait your turn, and really get a hang of those dodge timings. Keep that up, and you'll get to see one of the best credits ever made. And that's Ninja Gaiden 2. What a beast of a game. Now, as much as it does right, it has a few issues. And that's not the fault of the team, it's because the game just wasn't given enough time. Unfortunately, there was a falling out between the director, Itagaki, and the big studio, Koei Tecmo. So Ninja Gaiden 2 was caught in the line of fire, and it never received the final touches before release. But you know what? That might have been the same reason why we have such a gem of a game. Yeah, there's some pretty questionable enemy design, and a few encounters are head scratching. I'm looking at you, respawning jellyfish, but that unhinged factor we've come to love about this game was most likely the result of not wrangling things in during those final moments of development. That's how we got the absolute insane IS ninjas, and how there's no restraints on how many enemies drop into a single fight, so much so that it plummets performance. And to me, the chaotic nature of this game seems to perfectly capture how it must have been like to work on this game during such a turbulent time. Makes sense why we get these moments of genius game design and moments of dull monotony. But like I said before, NG2 only works on extremes. There's no in between. Because of all that, this game really is a roller coaster of peaks and valleys. It reaches godlike status in one moment to dredging through the mud the next. It is pretty unfortunate knowing these artists couldn't see their true vision come to light. But honestly, does any piece of art truly get finished? Sometimes you just have to accept those imperfections. And in the case of this game, it's filled with many. But that's why we adore it so much to this very day, and why it's so championed above the rest. Yeah, Ninja Gaiden 2 is art in its purest form. It's raw, it's unapologetic, and it's not for everyone. But when it clicks, it clicks. And now, let's talk about those other versions. So only a year after Vanilla 2 released, Sigma 2 followed soon after. And just like Sigma 1, it's a PlayStation exclusive that aims to streamline the experience. Which means, changes were made. Okay, maybe you can iron out some of those harsher edges of the original. So, let's see what they did. While giving the bow and shurikens their own dedicated buttons is a pretty massive change, so there's way less menuing just to swap between our most used projectiles. They did remove projectile UTs, however, kind of a cop-out move to drop the mechanic rather than fixing it. Definitely a missed opportunity there. But it did fix my criticisms with slow time to kill, because now it auto aims, locks on, and deals more damage at a baseline. So targets that once needed multiple charge shots to make any dents can now be taken out in mere seconds in Sigma 2. They did remove the water Gatling gun, windmill shuriken, and the incendiary shurikens. Windmill being gone is a weird one. Never used it, but why remove options instead of improving them? IS being removed really sucks, but those things were pretty overpowered, so I get it. And I actually like the new cannon, but anything's better than the water gun. Speaking of which, they removed water combat. I don't mind that it's gone either. It's optional against the water dragon, but other than that, water combat is forced on some of the weirdest enemies. On the rare occasions, it's Gajas, but it's mostly seen with the jellyfish. Those things really filled up most of the water sections, and I'm glad they're finally gone. They only serve to slow things down in the most uninteresting way possible. Sigma 2 also added more platforms or slightly changed the level design in specific areas. One of my favorites is being able to backtrack to the save after that Resetsu gauntlet fight. Yeah, that's a very welcome change. But the most notable example is against those eels. The water running section wasn't too horrible, but this new walkway will remove the potential headache. They also removed the forced eel fight earlier in the game, which isn't too bad either. Yeah, water sections in general were toned down a bit in this version. They even reduced poison worm spawn by a noticeable amount too. Hey, that's fine by me. They were tanky and couldn't be delimbed, so they won't be missed. Well, alright then. The worst enemies were either taken out or heavily sidelined. That's a good decision to remove those really bad encounters that bogged down Vanilla 2. They also attempted to improve boss AI, still a bit shaky, but they're not as exploitable. So it's a good change we need to learn the patterns for once. But they also removed some bosses. So out with the double armadillos, the double dragons, and the tunnel worm. And now they're replaced with some familiar faces. Marbus comes back, which is cool. They also added 2 giant statue fights. Honestly, these aren't bad. Mediocre, sure, but they're fine enough. Well, when compared to what I've experienced in the Ninja Gaiden series, these big bosses are nowhere near as horrible as a certain final boss. Now that is true pain. But what's actually cool is seeing bosses from Dragon Sword, the DS game. That's where Ababa first appeared. Even Resetsu debuted in that game, believe it or not. So I like how the DS game is getting more attention here in Sigma 2. Speaking of which, the ladies of Ninja Gaiden are back and better than ever. Rachel's kit was improved since her first appearance, better mobility for one, more techniques, and I like her forward shoulder flip leads to all landing state. Yeah, she's definitely more enjoyable to play now. And better yet, she finally gets to live up to her status as the legendary Fiend Hunter. Then Ayane. She stayed in the shadows to guide Ryu, but now she joins in on the action. And she has some pretty fun links into launchers. But like I said, the DS title gets referenced here a good bit. So Momiji leaves her handheld game and gets to show her new skills. Has this double jump, can also be used to do this aerial charge attack, which is pretty hype. So yeah, since the girls are here to stay with the Sigma versions, I'm glad there's effort to keep improving them. But once you play on higher difficulties, cracks start to show. Yeah, they have really fun mechanics of their own, but they're missing crucial stuff. Like they don't even have Wind Path. That move is a backbone of Ninja Gaiden's combat, so for them to not have it is a massive oversight. And their Getting Team Throw doesn't delim either, they just gently set them down on the floor. Yeah, because of that, they become a hassle to play on higher modes, since they're not quite as capable as Ryu. Still room for improvement, but we're going in the right direction. Okay, so far so good, but this next change started a domino effect. So, they fixed the performance issues of Vanilla 2, which is not bad. Get to have a more consistent experience for once. But what they did to achieve that is where things went haywire. So in order to have that more stable experience, they not only reduced the enemy count per fight, but they also removed massive amount of counters in general. Chapter 11 being a prime example of this. Now certain areas are just empty, feeling like ghost towns because of that. But since there's less enemies, certain mechanics had to be retooled. So delim rates were drastically nerfed and health pools were inflated to compensate. It's not as bad on lower difficulties. Enemies still have a decent delim rate, but it's the higher modes where this issue becomes a major problem, specifically the IS ninjas. Yeah, there's less of them, toss fewer projectiles, so that helped with the clarity problem, but Sigma 2 just made them unkillable. He can be delimbed, and they can take a beating before going down. You can land a full UT and an impo, and they still won't die. So now they're not fun for a different reason. Yeah, that's a dramatic shift from OG2. That glass cannon balance that most enemies followed is completely gone now. Not only that, but enemies deal enormous amount of damage too. A single fireball can just delete you in an instant, and same for grabs, they've also been buffed to instant kill. This kind of balance is insanely lopsided. We still follow the glass cannon archetype, but what we fight does not. It's actually more like Chaos Legion than anything else. Those two games have the exact same balancing issues. But yeah, it's such a major problem that leads to boring gameplay. And yeah, completely misunderstands the appeal of everyone being paper thin, but equally as deadly. That's what makes Ninja Gaiden work, but that's been abandoned here. Another criticism you'll hear is how they tone down the visceral effects. Now there's just purple mist everywhere. I'm neutral on this because that's the least of my concerns. The balancing of this game is its major flaw, unfortunately. But again, this isn't a big deal until those higher modes. That's where the issues start to really show themselves. Besides that, I think this game is pretty fun, because it's still Ninja Gaiden. Even at its worst, it's still better than a lot of what's out there. Goes to show just how great Vanilla 2 was, or shows just how behind the rest of the genre is in comparison. Who knows? But Sigma 2 being a toned down version of Vanilla 2, in both a good and bad way, is where it shines. I think it's the most approachable 3D Ninja Gaiden because of that. Again, only on the lower half of the difficulties. The wonky balancing isn't in full effect just yet, but its less demanding gameplay is perfect for newcomers. Like I said before, that original opening would throw you into the deep end without warning. But Sigma 2 having less to worry about is a nice way to ease into things. And I think Ninja Gaiden 2's structure is a lot more approachable as well. I wouldn't blame someone if the adventure aspects of one is a bit confusing at first. So instead of dealing with that, this linear approach will get you up to speed in no time. And I'm sure that's what most newcomers are expecting anyways from a Ninja Gaiden game, rather than exploring and doing dungeons. That I can definitely understand. So with Sigma 2 removing some low lows, it's less of a drag. But it also removed those high highs, so it won't give you that exhilarating feeling either. Yeah, just like Vanilla 2, it has its own pros and cons. It's just up to personal preference on what you want out of this entry. But for me, I can't ignore that balancing. And for the most recent revision, Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. It's been more than 15 years since the original release, so I guess it's time to revisit the sequel and attempt to fix it again. I'm all for it, honestly. There's a handful of things I like and dislike about both Vanilla and Sigma 2. So maybe this one can finally get it right. Well, that's what I'm hoping for anyways. But they did say it's the definitive version, and they also used the black subtitle. Which yeah, that's a lot to unpack already. Especially using the same naming convention as NGB. But to live up to that standard is kind of high. That release, back in 2005 mind you, buffed enemies by giving them guard breaks and guard crush attacks. Now we can't just block and counter everything. They created entirely new enemies, from recolors to new mini-bosses like the clones, each with their own weapon. Made balance changes, mainly the flying swallow. Improved bosses by removing those cheesy strats. They also gave him minions on higher difficulties. There's new bosses like Nishi and Istaros. Added new weapons like the Lunar and Smoke Bomb. Adding manual UT charging without the use of essence. And the ability to do on-landing directional attacks. Added Master Ninja mode. Every difficulty got remixed enemy spawns in different item locations. The ability to control a camera for once. And so much more. The amount of stuff that got overhauled is absolutely insane. Only other action game that did this was Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. Those games are perfect examples of what a definitive version looks like. or more specifically, what we expect out of a black re-release. So, let's see if they can live up to that legacy. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice, it's built on the framework of Sigma 2. Now I might have lost some of you by saying that, but we gotta remember, Sigma 2 does have some great qualities about it. And yeah, those are still here, amongst many other changes to bring things closer to vanilla. So they reverted the weapon upgrade system, they restored some of the missing encounters, so things don't feel as empty anymore. Enemies get delimbed far more consistently, even on Master Ninja, and the gore is back. Visual clarity is a lot more clear without those explosions everywhere. Boss AI isn't as exploitable as vanilla. One or two are still bugged, but we'll take what we can get. You can skip cutscenes on a fresh file. You couldn't do that in vanilla. Time to kill projectiles are way more faster than OG2. Shurikens and bows still have their own dedicated buttons, so less time in menus and more time on the action. The new and improved menu, by the way, is by far the best in the series. I like how each direction on the D-pad goes to a specific group. Before you had to cycle up or down. So as a quality of life change, this should definitely be carried over to future games. They kept the altered stages from Sigma 2 for a more smoother experience, which I like. So now you don't have to slowly push through these bars anymore. The HUD displays your Nimpo again. Don't know why Sigma 2 removed that. But what's most important is finally having better unlocks, not just simple recolors. What vanilla gave us was kinda boring, honestly. It's cool I got the gold skin, but yeah, there was nothing else worthwhile. I will admit, getting the Xbox profile picture for beating Master Ninja was pretty awesome. But other than that, anything with unique changes were locked behind a paywall. But in 2 Black, I can obtain them through normal gameplay like before. And finally, I can wear the classic outfit too. Vanilla 2 not having it was actually a bummer for me. And just in general, balance has been massively improved. The very skewed, tanky numbers of Sigma 2 were toned down to have that paper-thin effect again. But I will say this, we don't take enough damage now. They kinda overcorrected and made enemies scratch you instead. Because of that, I recommend you play the higher modes over the lower ones. And just in general, I prefer Master Ninja on 2 Black than Vanilla 2. That mode in original NG2 really emphasized its unpolished areas and only added more of my least favorite enemies. Yeah, I really can't stress enough how much I dislike poison worms and jellyfish. And I doubt you'll find someone defending all the forced lesser Quetzalcoatl fights in Vanilla 2 as well. Yeah, glad these problem enemies show up less or not at all in this version as well. I will admit though, I haven't touched the lower difficulties, wanted to jump straight into Master Ninja as soon as possible. And I have to say, very hard felt perfect to play. Struck the right balance between challenging and fair. So those issues on how difficulties that Sigma 2 had have been fixed. So yeah, definitely try your hand at those harder modes for this version specifically. So 2 Black has less of the bad stuff about vanilla, but it doesn't include the interesting mechanics, side objectives, and extra modes. Now that I find lazy because why not improve on those concepts? The original NGB made sure to rework many of its weaker elements, and then some. So it failed to live up to past standards in that regard. But NG2B also keeps some of the improvements of Sigma 2, while also removing their fun additions. It's a shame that extra content and the unlockable costumes that were tied to them weren't brought over. They even removed online functionality, so no more co-op. And that's because the versions we got on the Master Collection are based on the Vita ports. That port removed co-op, which means Sigma 2 and 2 Black won't have it either. So again, they only removed past features instead of collecting all of this amazing content in one place. Doesn't sound very definitive to me. But yeah, the NG girls are still here, but are way more fun to play. And with the damage buffs they received through an update, they've only gotten better to play and less of an uphill battle with Sigma 2's jank balancing. But they're still a step behind Ryu, because them not having a win path and having this gentle guillotine throw is a major flaw in their kits. But the power gap isn't as noticeable like before, which is nice. And now that there's chapter select, you can skip the levels if you please. Now if only we could play any character on any chapter like Razor's Edge. That would have been hype, but those newer features weren't brought back to enhance past experiences sadly. Just shows how the extra effort wasn't put in compared to past re-releases. So 2 Black has its pros, but it definitely has its faults. Just like every version of NG2 it seems. Like the tracking is still questionable, that decap ender on Lunar's 360 UT misses quite a lot when it never did in Vanilla 2. Because of those niche differences, it's even more about your preferences than ever before. There's 3 official re-releases and fan revisions too, so we're kinda spoiled for choice on which way you want to experience the game. And none of them are wrong either. Just depends on what you're looking for, right? But I know many wish that Team Ninja would port the original versions. Well, they did. It's just on a console that very little people own. And I've noticed a trend that Ninja Gaiden fans always buy the latest Xbox just to have access to the series. But yeah, we're happy with this beefed up port that greatly improves performance. But for anyone new wanting to check this version out, well, the options are a bit limited, unfortunately. It's a lot to ask for someone to either emulate and deal with the troubleshooting, or to buy an Xbox, which is a crazy investment just to see if you'll even like the games at all. But I know many are still chasing Vanilla 2, and with it being so inaccessible, its mystical status will only continue to grow. But I fear that will only hurt NG2 in the long run, because once someone does finally play it, maybe expectations were set a little too high. It's an amazing game for sure, but it has a few problems. Now it could be what you're looking for, but it might not either. Each version has their give and their take, that's just the truth of it. So play whatever version you can get your hands on, because the only person who can decide which is best is you. And yeah, we can never go wrong with playing more Ninja Gaiden to figure that out. Now, to make one final thing clear about 2 Black, I won't back up their claim about it being the definitive version, or using the Black moniker either. Both words carry a lot of weight in this franchise, and while myself and many others seem to agree that this new version did not live up to those expectations in one form or another. So is it definitive? No, not by a long shot. And it sure doesn't put in the same amount of effort as NGB did. And that laundry list of improvements and additions between NG04 to NG Black is quite expansive. Wish this game did the same, but unfortunately, it uses the subtitle to attempt to group itself with 10 out of 10 quality by name alone, while doing the bare minimum. It's misleading, to put it nicely. But is NG2B good? Yeah, even with this fault, it actually had me question if I prefer this version over Vanilla 2. So take that for what you will. But honestly, it just doesn't have that X factor that Vanilla 2 does. I like that 2B removed my least favorite things about Vanilla while keeping the pros of Sigma 2. But even then, it just doesn't reach those previous heights. It needs to be a little more unhinged. Just a little.